What makes a weapon unique in Destiny 2? Is it the perks, the stats, the model, the lore? Maybe a mix of all of the above? How many weapons do you have in your vault? Are you almost out of space like 90% of the player base? Great! Now, how many of those hundreds of weapons do you regularly use? With over 340 weapons introduced since sunsetting 3 years ago, 90% of weapons to 90% of the player base simply does not matter. With a blessing from Ascendant Nomad, today I want to talk more about the foundational problems with weapons in Destiny 2. And when I'm done, I will propose a potential solution to this problem that you will really like. First, I need to help you understand how we got here, why apathy is becoming the dominant emotion when new loot drops, and I think it boils down to 3 major problems, so let's start with a balance issue. We are in arguably the most balanced metas we have ever seen. Whether you are in PvP or in PvE, nearly every weapon with a semi-decent and appropriate role will perform adequately for most content for most players. This is of course a good thing. Bad balance can eliminate certain weapons from ever seeing play, but over the 9 years I've enjoyed this gun game feel, I have noticed a silent killer to how Destiny balances its weapons. Every season, we get at least 20 weapons added to the loot pool, whether it's from raids, world drops, Crucible, or the season pass, and whenever any one of these weapons overperform, the most common way to fix them is, of course, to nerf them. Weapons need to have pros and cons to feel interesting, but oftentimes when we nerf or buff a weapon in Destiny, we tend to push the archetypes closer together. In fact, often the easiest way to know when a weapon needs a nerf or a buff is when it breaks out of its intended bounds for its use cases. Thank you, Immortal. So weapons continue to get their rough edges shaved off, and after literally 9 years of this process, we end up with a blob where most weapons function so similarly to one another that the difference between archetypes becomes more and more difficult to distinguish. Is it any wonder that when a new weapon drops, most players just simply don't bother with it? We have reached an era where every weapon feels super.
And when everyone's super!
But what then? Am I proposing that we should just never buff or nerf a weapon ever again and just let chaos reign? Absolutely not. This is the first paradox in understanding what is at the root of Destiny's weapon problem. The solution isn't balance. And here's the thing, I don't blame Bungie for where we are. The easiest solution to make something not a problem is to remove what makes it problematic. Sometimes that can be easier said than done, sure, but as a general philosophy, it's a good one. Where we are for balance is a great place to be, but it's a bad place to stay. As a cherry-picked example, the mechanical difference between 720 auto rifles, a 720 SMG, a 600 SMG, and a 600 auto with the same perks and elemental burn is so small that besides the subtle differences in range and stability, each weapon is nearly interchangeable with each other. We have created a sandbox where differences are too small, and the paradox is that this isn't a problem. In fact, I would say it's the first step in evolving the balance to an even better place, but we have another issue to overcome. Let's look back on our full auto cherry-picked example. As it stands, when all weapons are mechanically twins with each other, one of these choices will still be objectively correct. Assuming all perks and damage types are the same, one of these weapon archetypes will just simply be better than the rest. And because each of these weapons are functionally interchangeable for most activities, once you learn what this best choice is, you have very little reason to deviate outside of just pure curiosity. We can nerf an archetype, sure, but then the next best choice will just simply take its place. This isn't just for PvP either. As Nomad excellently pointed out, you're either playing PvE content that's too easy so your choice doesn't matter, or you're playing content that's so hard it must matter. Nomad described part of the issue as god roll culture, which I don't think is wrong, but I would argue the problem of this goes even deeper than this. It's not just a god roll problem for perks and stats, it's a god roll problem for an entire archetype. It's the reason you see tons of 140 hand cannons like Rose, Palindrome, Ace in PvP, Igneous Hammer for 120s, and hardly if ever do you see a 180. It's why exotics are starting to feel less and less exotic. It's why you feel more and more apathetic towards new seasonal loot unless it has some perk that could potentially be broken. It's more than just power creep, it's playstyle creep. This leads to where we are now. From first-hand experience with game design, players will optimize the fun out of a game. It's just human nature. This is why no one could or should ever blame you for choosing meta choices in PvP or PvE. The game actively rewards you for winning. It wants you to go find those objectively correct options, then use them until they get nerfed. This is the cycle of Destiny loot. But through it all, we keep pushing closer and closer to center. Less and less uniqueness, and more quote-unquote balance at the cost of personality. Abilities have the most personality. That's why I think you see them above everything else, irregardless of their power level. We have been so wrapped up over whether it's a matter of quality versus quantity that we haven't tried asking if it's... Nomad is far too British sometimes. He's far too kind to take a seat on the throne of the armchair developer. I'm an American, however, so I will be the jerk and I'll give it a shot. I think the most thorough way to tackle this weapons problem is to massively overhaul mechanically overlapping archetypes. Give players a reason to be excited about the exact same perks on weapons with similar RPMs and ranges. The way I could see this best done is by demanding different niches, playstyles, and use cases for each archetype. And I think we have a pretty great example of what that looks like when it's done right. This is Titanfall 2, possibly the greatest FPS of all time. While Titanfall has far fewer weapons, it gives us some clever outlines for how weapons in the same family can feel different. For an example, every sniper archetype in Destiny is a hit scan weapon with a medium-ish range scope, with a major difference being that it has a different RPM or damage. But with body shot damage being nerfed and everybody running snapshot if they can, functionally each weapon is more like each other than ever before. In Titanfall, however, only one of the weapons is hit scan. The other is a bolt action projectile that hits like a truck, and the other fires 2 shots that makes hitting a moving target easier. You get what I'm saying here? Of course, this game is vastly different in terms of TTK and movement speeds, but surely we can derive more diversity while still keeping it balanced within Destiny. For snipers, why not borrow a page from Titanfall and let the high-impact snipers deal nearly lethal body shot damage at the cost of a much slower fire rate and a projectile instead of hit scan? Let them be able to body shot kill in PvP with a damage perk, because now players must be skilled enough to deal with an even slower rate of fire for more punishment when they miss, and a new skill of having to lead and predict with a projectile weapon. This allows us to have 2 snipers both with, let's say, snapshot sights and opening shot to feel different on something greater than just its base stats. Still with me? Okay, what about SMGs? What if precision frames, the 600 RPM frames, got slightly reduced range with the benefit of an amazing hipfire accuracy? It would give Bungie's many attempts at hipfire perks finally a home. Adaptive 900 RPM frames share 2 similar space with lightweight 900 frames. What if we made the adaptive frames a rapid fire 5-round burst like the Vigilance Wing? This would suddenly feel far more controllable and consistent, and we could put previously pulse rifle exclusive perks like Headseeker on them for even more flavor. 720 SMGs could get the Titanfall alternator treatment and have an amazing body shot time to kill, but be very difficult to control regardless if we're on mouse and keyboard or controller. Alright, so with me, shotguns are at a place where most players either use a precision frame or an aggressive frame for PvP, and for PvE, most players have found their best shotgun for 99% of shotgun required encounters. For PvP, what if rapid fires held and picked up more, let's say double the amount of shells, but couldn't one-shot even in point-blank ranges? Instead, these are designed around double barreling someone at farther than normal ranges with a quick but punishable TTK. What if aggressive frames could hit targets from really far ranges but struggle to secure kills unless they were hitting some of the pellets on the head even within point blank ranges? And slugs are fine, honestly. I know what you're thinking. Yes, change is scary. Likely something I proposed here would be too strong or not enough to change anything, but I think starting to take some small steps in this direction is what will revive interest in weapons in Destiny 2. And it isn't like we don't already have examples of great archetype diversity in Destiny. Sidearms can be 2 burst, 3 burst, rapid fire, lightweight, or I can't believe it's not hand cannon style, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be extremely different firing modes in order to create different play styles. Look at pulse rifles, for example. The rapid fire pulses feel way different than a lightweight pulse, which feels way different than an aggressive pulse. Bungie has even tried some wacky combos in the past, like the Coriolis Force or the Wild Fright. And I know, these weapons suck, but I just wish that they would have kept trying with these instead of just leaving these weird weapons to rot. I think the biggest hurdle for Bungie to overcome is us, players. We hate change. But if this problem keeps up, are we willing to hold on to what's comfortable while we let innovation continue to suffocate? What do you think? Should we massively change certain archetypes to try to create more playstyles, or is where we are where we need to be? Do we even have a weapons issue at all? Let me know in the comments. Go check out Nomad's video, I've linked it in the description, talking about this same topic, but in a much better accent and much more holistically. Bless your faces, and deuces.